Good evening, everyone, once again. Welcome to another edition of Performance Management. In today's class, we shall continue with our lecture on limiting factor. Guess what? We have enough time, right? We have what? Network is not our problem anymore, right? Battery for system or anything is not our problem anymore, right? So guess what? We have enough time. So we need to complete this question today, right? And move ahead. So in our previous lecture, right, we're able to look at this question. Now, one of the problem of this question is the hours per unit, right? And we're able to unlock that because when you want to determine, the first step is to determine, to compare the required as well as what available for you to know if there is a limiting factor or not. Now imagine they have available hours of 50,000 hours, class 50,000 hours. Now, and they plan to sell this. When you are planning to sell something, it means that you already produce that particular quantity if you want to sell. Is that not so? So now, if grade 1 labor is paid 15 naira per hour, right? Grade 2 labor is paid 30 naira per hour, class. Now, if grade 1 is 15 naira per hour, so how many numbers of hours will it take X to produce 1 unit of 16,000, right? That is what we did last week, right? When we say this week, we say, oh, 75 naira per unit divided by what? Divided by the 50 naira per hour, we give you the numbers of hours that it will take grade 1 to produce 1 unit. And that is what we did in our words. You can see now, because sometimes the hours per unit is supposed to be given in the question, but it is not given. For you to get it, you need to divide the cost divided by the what? The amount paid by hour. Please take note of that because you will see more of this as we proceed, right? Now, another thing you should also understand is that in this question, they've given you that is either grade 1 or grade 2 that will be the limiting factor, which is the labor. It is labor. In some questions, you may be given another available hour for material, available hour for direct labor, grade 1, grade 2. You can equally have material 1, material 2, or material A, material B. It's just for you to check which one of these is the limiting factor, class. Don't forget that when you have one limiting factor, you use what? Contribution per limiting factor. That is limiting factor. When you have more than one limiting factor, you use what? Linear programming, of which we will get there. Right? Now, we're able to get the hours per unit they required that will take them to produce all these units for grade what? For grade 1, right? All these units, which we have this. Then the available hours is this. Available hours means that we don't want to know. This is what we have. This is the numbers of hours you need to use to produce that what? All those 16,000, 28,000, and 15,000 units, right? And that is why we have short for, because they said, I call Fumi now. Fumi, hey. All right. So, this is the question actually. I'm actually explaining this question again. Now, this is available hours for grade 1 and this is available hours for grade 2, which means that we don't want to know what will happen at the end of the period. When you want to produce the total of this is the numbers of hours you will use to produce for grade 1 and this is for grade 2. We don't want to know, class. We don't want to do what? The company don't want to know. That is their available. That is their capacity, right? Now, And I said that in some question, you may be given material, another material, you may be given that, oh, 20 kg of material A, 50 kg of material B available as well. So in that case, you need to test which one of these is the limiting factor. Is it the material or labor? Because the labor one will still be given to you in the question. That is when you will now test. But in this question, we only they give us available hours for the labor, which is divided into grade 1 and grade 2. Then which means that we need to test which one of these is the what is the limiting factor. Right? Now, by doing that, now you were paid, of course, when you want to produce, you pay them per hour. You pay your laborers, you pay them what? You pay them per hour. Now the question now is that you pay 50 naira per hour, which means that when you work for 1 hour, we pay you 50 naira. Is that not so? Now the question now is that, and they want to produce 16,000 units. Now, how many hours will it take them to produce just 1 unit of 16,000 units? Of course, you are given budgeted sales. I know some students will be looking for production. It's only sales now. Is sales still the same thing as production class? It is logic reasoning. Now, you want to sell 16,000 units. Now, when you want to sell, automatically you've already produced 16,000 units before you say you want to sell 16,000 units, right? You go to the market, or you want to sell 50,000 bags. Definitely you've already produced, you have it. So your sales here is your production class. Now, to get hours per unit, plus this is cost. This is 75 naira per unit. Divide it by this, right? It will give you hours per unit. How many hours per unit means that you will use maybe 1 hour to produce 1 unit. How many hours will it take you to produce 1 unit? Class. In some questions, the hours per unit will be given, right? Or the kg per unit that they will use to produce 1 unit. It may be given to you in the question. Now, why do we have to look for the hours per unit? Don't forget the steps in limiting factor. You have to identify, excuse me, the required resources. That is, you compare your required and the available, right? You compare your what required and what available. What is required? Required means that if I want to produce 16,000 units, what will it take me to produce that 16,000 units? That is your required. But available is based on the organization policy. This is what we have. We don't want to know how many units you will use to produce it. Yeah. So in our previous lecture, so we were able to do what? Get the hours per unit first. 1.5 hours per unit for X and that. Now, what do? If it will take 1.5 hours per unit to produce only 1 unit class, when you want to produce X, you use 16,000. When you want to produce X, right? It will be what? What is the total numbers of hours? 1.5 hours times 6,000 units will give you the numbers of hours you use in producing 16,000 units. Class, this is hours per unit. Per unit, hours per unit. It goes with unit. It goes with what? Unit. If it is hour, if it is 5 naira per hour, you know that, oh, that one goes with what? Hours, right? So we're able to calculate the hours, right, for each of the products. That is, it will take 24 hours, 24,000 hours to produce 16,000 what? 16,000 units. It will take 30,800 hours to produce what? 28,000 units. And this is so when you add all these hours together, it will give you the required hours that you will use, right? You will use to produce what? The required hours that you will use to produce the required hours that you will use. I'm coming. That you will use to produce the total of 16,000 units 28,000 units and 15,000 units. Then why the available is what? 50,000 hours, right? Available is what? 50,000 hours. So now, what is the difference? We tell you that what we have is 50,000. Oh, then you, for you to produce that particular unit, you have to spend 62,300 300 hours. That is above our budget, above our capacity. There is a shortfall. There is a limiting factor here. There is a constraint here. Is that not so? There is a constraint in labor hours of grade one, right? Why the second one, still the same thing applicable? We use the cost to divide this, right? So we now get the what? The hours per unit. So when you multiply the hours per unit times this, we give you what? 8,000 hours, 67,500. So when you add these three together, you can have 117,500 hours. That is required, that it will take you to produce the 16,000, 28,000, and 15,000 units, right? So you compare it with what? Available. What is the available that we have? The capacity of the company, right? Now, the capacity of the company is what? 120 hours. They can't go above. So definitely they have surplus. You can see they have surplus hours available, right? So if they have someone that wants to take up the overtime, because in some question can be so can be so complicated that, oh, the remaining 2,500 hours will be used for overtime. Is that not so? Will be used for what? Overtime. We'll get there, right? So now don't forget the steps. Excuse me. Don't forget the steps, right? We have highlighted the steps. The first step, right, is for you to what? Calculate the amount of scarce resources, that is determine the limiting factor by comparing the required quantity and the what available. We've done that, right? We calculate the contribution per unit of each of the products. Then you calculate the contribution per limiting factor. You rank based on that, then you allocate the resources, then you determine the production maximization, right? Now, we move to the next one. So now, the next thing is to determine the contribution. Step, Clementina, step 2, contribution. Let me just keep that contribution. Let's say contribution per limiting factor. Clementina, do you have question for me? Okay, that's fine. Okay, contribution per limiting factor. Let's just do it all together. Right? You know, for you to determine your contribution per limiting factor, you need to determine the contribution first. Class, you need to determine contribution for you already determined that your limiting factor, this is your limiting factor, is grade 1. That is where the constraint is, right? Because it is 62,300 hours. It's more than the capacity that we have. There is a constraint, which means that we cannot produce all these 16,000 units, 28,000 units, and 15,000 units altogether because we don't have the capacity. So that is where you will now rank when we get to that stage, class. Now, contribution what? Per what? Per limiting factor, right? Please, you need to per limiting factor, right? Contribution per limiting factor. They want to produce X, Y, right? X, Y, Z. Don't forget that your contribution will start from your sales. Calculate contribution first before per limiting factor. Then your contribution first. Now, quickly, don't forget your Naira sign is very what? Is very important, right? Your presentation. Now, if this is established, so we need to, if you have the question, please let's check it. What is the selling price? What is the selling price? If you have the question, the selling price is what? Okay, you don't have the question, sorry.
So the selling price is 560
Five.
for X.
Okay, I'm coming.
560 for X.
Okay, coming. SY Z. Let me show you the question so that you can screenshot. Then at the end of this class, I will check. I can send the question in material, or you wait till the end of the class. Okay, let's check. You can see screenshot it and let's move on, right? Let's move on, please. Thank you. Now you can see that the question says that what product mix would maximize the profit, right? Production mix, that is the units, right? Then show result profit per product and in what? In total. We'll get there. Now class, when they say you should determine production mix or production mix, means that we don't have enough capacity to produce this. Based on what you allocate, what is the unit that we are going to produce? Look at this now. They don't have the capacity for 62,300 hours. They don't have the capacity, right? So therefore, they need to reduce the numbers of units that they will produce. That is your production mix. We'll get there, right? Now, selling price. So what is the selling price for this? X. What is the selling price for
560.
X? Okay, 560. 560. What is the selling price for this?
310.
310.
Yeah.
310. Next,
510.
5,
5 what?
510.
10.
Okay, 510. Thank you. So next is variable cost. Variable cost. You know, this is selling price per unit, right? Class, this is selling price per unit. You know, when you want to get the total sales, you multiply it by the unit. Is that not so, class? This is what?
Yes.
Selling price per what, class? Selling price per
Unit.
unit. When you want to get the sales, you multiply it by the units. You have your sales, right? So this one will also be variable cost per unit, since you are using selling price per unit. Variable cost per unit, right? So now we go back to the question. We check for variable cost. If the variable cost per unit is given, you can see that our variable cost per unit. What are the variable cost per unit here? Material is a what? Is a variable cost. Direct labor is a what? Is a variable. It's a what? Variable cost. If you have your variable production overhead, it's a variable cost. Class. It is a what? It's a variable cost. So we start from material, then we move to labor, right? That is the two direct material, because this is cost per unit, right? So that is the variable cost per unit. We move on. So variable cost per unit. So okay, let me bring this one down to this side. Oh. Okay, so variable cost per unit, direct material. Give me figure for direct material, please. This direct material is per unit. What is the figure?
230.
230. Next.
230.
Next.
12 naira.
12. Next.
275.
275.
275. Okay. We have direct labor.
For grade 1.
Direct labor. Grade 1. So what is the grade 1?
75.
55. 55.
75. 55.
55.
And
And
25.
25.
So grade 2.
15.
We have
54.
50.
45.
let's do it this way. It's okay. Sorry, please. Taufik, you give me figure. Then Pere, right? Pere, right? So Pere will
Yes.
be at the background to give me figure as well. So Olaide should, but please, others should just mute their mic, please. Please, others, you can mute your mic. Thank you. Okay. So grade two. After grade two, is this correct?
After grade 2, we don't have any.
Okay.
grade.
Give me the course quickly for grade two.
X 15, Y 45, and 35.
45 and 35.
Sorry, 135. Sorry for Z.
Z 135. The first one is 15, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So now that is variable cost. You can see some students will get confused. Do you know why they will get confused? Because they will look at it that, oh, direct material, direct labor. Direct labor is a limiting factor now. So why do we want to use it to calculate a variable cost? Class, when you want to determine your contribution, whether it is limiting factor, it is not a limiting factor, you use everything to determine your contribution. Please, you use everything to do what? To determine your what? To determine your contribution, right? Now, if this is established, right? If this is established, the next one is your contribution per unit. So, what is the difference? Give me figure. Contribution per unit, right, class. So, what is the contribution? Contribution per unit. So,
240,
class.
198,
Two what?
40,
240.
240,
198,
190.
8,
Okay, 198. Next,
and 75. 75.
5.
175. Okay. So this is what? This is contribution. If you don't know how to calculate contribution is sales. 560 minus 230 minus 75 minus 15 is what? Is contribution. Now, excuse me, having calculated the contribution, don't forget that we want to determine the contribution per limiting factor. Class, which one of these grade is the limiting factor, class? Which one of these grades? Which
Grade
one of
1.
these grade is
Grade
grade
1.
one? Grade one is the what? Is the limiting factor, right? Grade one is the what? Is the limiting factor. So now, when you want to determine the contribution per limiting factor, right? What you need to do is that pick what is the hours per unit. This is the hours per unit, right? Pick the hours per unit because that is what you will use to determine your total hours. The limiting factor hours per unit. If it is material, pick the material kg per material. If it is labor, pick the one of per one, right? So since grade one is the limiting factor, you pick the hours per unit. If it is material, it will be kg per unit. We'll get there, right? So we'll pick this hours per unit, 1.5. So we already identify grade one as the what? As the limiting factor. Grade one, right? So grade one hours per unit, right? I can say hours slash units, which means that hours per unit, right? Hours what per unit. So the first one is what? What is the hours per unit for grade one? What is the hours per unit for grade
1.5.
one? Thank you. 1 point what?
50.
1.5 hours per unit, right? Next,
1.10.
1.1 hours per unit. This is where they are picking it. So let me go back. So you will see where we are picking it. It's not magical. This is it. Can you see it? This is the answer. This is it. Can you see it? You can see that it's not magic. Um, Pere, Pere, Pere. Please, when you are
Sir?
not, yes,
Sir?
when you are not, you can unmute your mic. When you want to talk, you can mute your mic. When you want to talk, you unmute your mic. Okay? Thank you. So you can see where they pick it, right? Now, if that is established, okay, the last one is what? Sorry. The last one is what? What is
It's
the last one?
0.5. It's 0.5.
0.5 hour per unit.
0.5
5.
hours per unit. Now, when you want to determine your contribution per unit, now let me now teach you one scope now. This will be A. This will be A. You open your brackets. A. This will be A, right? Contribution, let me just use per slash units. This will be A. Then this will be what? Open bracket B. So if you want to determine contribution
Per
per
limited.
limiting factor, you will now do it this way, right? Right? You say contribution per limiting factor. You can slash it. You can say per limiting factor, right? Contribution per what? Limiting factor. So contribution per limiting factor is A divided by B. Class, is A what? A divided by what? A divided by B. Class,
160.
contribution per limiting factor. Class, contribution per limiting factor is A divided by B. You get your contribution per unit. Check if it is grade 1, if it is material, right? You check for it. The one that have the limiting factor. Then you use, if it is material, you use the kg per unit. If it is hours, you use the hours per unit to determine contribution per limiting factor. Of course, you will test it. Which one of this is a limiting factor? Is it material? Is it labor? Right? So contribution per limiting factor is what? 240 divided by 1.5. What do you have?
160.
Is just 160, Abi?
115 naira
Per what?
Per hour.
unit.
Per unit. Okay, oh. Okay. I'm coming. I'm coming. We'll do something now. I'm coming, Taufik. We'll do something now. Right? We'll do something now. So now, let me give you something. A is what? 240, right? 240 per unit divided by 1.5 hours per unit. Is that not so? 1.5 hours. No, now let me use this one so that it will clear. Let me use this. Let me use this. Right? So this will come down like this. Okay, let me use this. Now you can see now. If unit cancel units, class, if unit cancel units, what do you have? You have hour here. You have 240 naira. Is that not so? Class, is that not so? Is that not so? So now, class, units will cancel units. So there is no more unit again. Then what do you have? You have hours. Is that not so? You have what? Hours. So therefore, if it's 240 divided by 1.5 hours per unit will give us 160 naira per hour. That is the contribution per limiting factor because the unit have cancelled units, right? Per what? Per hour, right? Per hour. You move to the next one, still the same thing. 198 naira per 198 naira per unit, class, divided by 1.10 hours per unit. Unit cancel
180.
units. What do you have, class?
180.
One
80.
180, right? 180. Don't call figure like that too, right? 180 naira per what? Per
Power.
hour, right? Per hour, right? Next is what? What do you have?
150. Power.
150 naira per
Power.
what? Per hour.
Power.
Now, haven't calculate this, class. Haven't calculate this. The next thing is to rank based on our steps. Now, we may have a challenge in ranking. Why? Because in some question, when you have, don't forget, at the beginning, let me quickly take you back. For those of you who actually watched that video, you would have noticed something here. Note where the question states that the company is committed to producing a guaranteed minimum. Class, you have a special customer, and this special customer usually demand for 50,000 units. That is special order, or we can say minimum guarantee. It means that before you rank anything first, before you rank first, you must pay that, you must allocate that 25,000 units. You must pay that this person first. You must allocate that unit first. That is if there is a special order or a guarantee, which we will look at the question now, class. So now, since there is nothing like that, we'll just rank, then we'll allocate, we'll do the production mix based on the ranking, right? Taufik, I'm coming, right? Now, ranking. So which one are you ranking first? The one that has the highest what? Contribution per limiting factor. So which one has the first one? Which one are we ranking first? We rank this
Why?
first,
Why?
right?
Why? Okay.
Then we rank this to be
Uh,
second, right? So why this is what? The last one is the third. So which means that when you want to allocate your resources, this is how you will allocate it. Unless if the question states otherwise, if there is special order or a guarantee, minimum guarantee, we will get there, right? Okay, Taufik.
sorry, sir. It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Okay, okay,
I,
okay, 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 that's fine. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. Now, if this is established, the next thing is you've already, the first step, you're required and you're available. Compare them. Calculate the contribution per unit. We've done that. Calculate the contribution per limiting factor. You don't even need to separate it. You can just say contribution per limiting factor like this. Right? You already know what you want to do, class. After that, you rank. Then you will now do your production mix. Production mix is the unit that you will produce based on your ranking. Because why do you have to rank? It's because of there is scarce resources. Then you need to allocate it based on the available resources that we have, based on what they have, because grade 1 is the limiting factor, right? Now, production mix is the next step. You have to produce, right? Step what? Step 3. Can use it as step 3. Production mix, right? That will maximize the profits. Now, you have what? X, Y. Please master this. You will not see this format. It's not a textbook format anyway. So that is why I usually say it. Once anything you know anything you want to do in this life, just know it very well, right? Just know it very well. That is just it. So pay attention to this part as well. It's very important, right? So because we will still use it when we get to special order, when we get to shut down and all that, right? Decision making. Please don't forget we are in decision making. You don't joke with with decision making class. It's very important. It takes 30% of the syllabus. Guess what? We've already highlighted all the areas we need to touch. Under what? Decision making. So you at the end, maybe by March ending, you should be able to be confident of yourself that yes, I can solve question under decision making, right? You should be able to say, oh, I can do this question. Is it not limiting factor? Oh, is it not budget? Yes, it is a budget. Okay, discontinued operation. Okay, what other short-term decision? Oh, relevant costing, right? Oh, make or buy decision. We move on, right? Now, the first thing you need to do is that what is the available resources that we want to allocate? So you don't even need to do this first. So the
50,000.
question is available, you say available hours. Don't forget, grade 1 is the limiting factor. Now let me quickly take you back to this part, right? Okay. Grade 1 is the what? Limiting factor. So look at what we want to allocate, right? Because we can't produce 16,000 units, 28,000 units, 28,000 units, and what? 15,000 units, because we don't have enough what? We don't have enough capacity, right? So the available hours coming in from my project. Okay. So the available hours is what? 150 is 50,000 hours, right? 50,000 hours. So you say available is 50,000 hours. Don't forget, why do we have to pick 50,000 hours? Because grade 1 is our limiting, is the limiting factor. Now, if you want to allocate these resources, class, you allocate it based on the ranking, right? Which one will come first? Why? Right? Why will come first? So therefore, you can now do what? You allocate to Y. Allocate to allocation to Y. So how many hours are you allocating to Y? Now let's go back. Let's go back. Right? Can CPM is very simple, right? Now look at this. Why? Why we use how many hours? Product Y. 30,800 hours. The total of these hours, yeah, give us what? 62,300, which means that we've overused the hours. So we want to allocate it. There is a scarce resources. Now, it will now take 30,800 hours to produce 28,000 units, right? That is what we want to allocate. 30,800, because that is the one we rank first, right? 30,800 hours. Now, class, available hours. Let me say available hours for X, Y, Z. Now, you minus, when you deduct 50,000 minus 30,800. So this will be available hours for X and what? Z. Right? X and Z. So what is the difference?
19,200.
What do we have?
19,200.
19,200. So this is 19,200 hours. That is what we want to allocate now. Again. Then, class. So 30,000 units, 30,800 hours to produce how many units? The first one, 30,800 hours. We produce how many units? 28,000 units. Okay. Now, go back and say, oh, this is 28. It will produce 28,000 units, right? 28,000 units. You write it. Then the next allocation, which one are we allocating to again? X, right? Now, the question now is that how many hours will X use to produce the numbers of units? We go back. How many hours? X. Because we are allocating to X. Now, X will take 24,000 hours, of which we don't have enough capacity for this. What we have now that is available is 19,000 something, right? 19,400 hours. Class, am I communicating? Is it magic? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Am I communicating,
Yes, sir.
please? I need to confirm that,
Yes,
please.
communicating.
Yes,
Okay,
I am.
good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, you can see that we don't have enough capacity. 24,000 hours, we give you the production of 16,000 units. We don't have. But what we have that is available is 19,400 hours, which means that we cannot produce all these 16,000 units. We need to work with the 19,400 hours. The question is that how many units will that 19,400 hours produce? Because we can't produce the whole of 16,000 units because of the capacity, right? So we can produce 24,000, we can produce 16,000 units because 16,000 units will give what? 24,000 hours to produce that, of which we have about 19,000 watts. We have what? 19,200. Class, what should we do? We need to allocate it, right? So therefore, we can say available hours for X is 19,200. The question is, how many units will this 19,200 hours produce? Because we can't produce the whole 16,000 units because of the what? Because of the
12.8.
capacity. I'm coming. Because of the what? Because of the capacity. What? Because of the capacity, class. So this, because of the capacity, so this will give us nil. But guess what? Come, let me finish this. Now, how many units? Now, for you to get the units, class, for you to get the numbers of units that X you will use the numbers of units, right? That 19,200 hours can produce. Don't forget, in limiting factor, you can produce fraction. That is one of the limitations, right? While in linear programming, you cannot produce a fraction. We'll get there, right? So this is what 19,200 hours. To get the unit, you say 19,200 hours. Class, I will teach you something. See, PM is not to go and cram. See, just have an understanding of PM, right? Now, this is this. You divide it, right? Divided by what? Divided by what? Now, class, divided by what? Now, the question now is, how many hours? How many hours will S use to produce 1 unit? Class, how many hours will S
1
use
hour
to
15
produce 1
minutes.
unit? You can see that X will use 1 hour, 1.5 hours per unit. You can see that it has units. That is why when you divide it, hours cancel hour. You have units. That is why you have to use it. Class, so we bring this one down to this part, right? You go and check for the hourly hours per unit. If it is material, check for the materials per kg for the limiting factor, right? So you divide it. What do you have, class? What do you have? When you divide it, you can see class. Look, see, hours, hours, we cancel hours. You have units.
12,800 units.
Okay, 12,800 what?
Yeah.
Units. Thank you. Oh, 5 minutes. This call will end in 5 minutes. So, okay. Let's quickly finish this so that we can create another link. 12, 12 what?
12,800 units.
12,800 units. And they will not produce no product Z. Why? Because they don't have the capacity to do that. They don't have the capacity to do that. See, some questions are so wicked. So, okay, in the sense that they will tell you that, oh, don't forget that grade 2 have SSRs that they've not utilized that SSRs. The question may tell you that SSR, so use it to produce part of product Z. Since you don't have the capacity, that SS class, that SS class, that SS, use it to produce some fraction of product Z. Class, are we still together, please? Hello?
We are together.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, we are
Now, yes, I
following.
just want you to understand that, oh, question can come in any way, but have an understanding of these things, right? That is decision making. You want to make a decision, right? To the management based on the available what? Resources, right? So you can ask your question. Unmute your mic and ask your question. If you have question for me, unmute your mic, please.